So when working with JavaScript or any programming language really, you're gonna have to work with variables and data types. So variables is a reference to something that has a value, and the value always has a data type. So digging deeper into that, if we look at our welcome to this JavaScript tutorial, if we'd like to declare it to a variable, we could do that. So there are three ways to declare a variable: by using var, the attribute var, the attribute const, or the attribute let. So var is unfortunately primitive and is barely used any longer because of how it's structured. So what's more common these days while programming in JavaScript is the const declaration and the let declaration. So in this scenario, we're going to be working with the const declaration. So we're going to type const, and then we're going to name our variable. So you could name it anything. In my case, I'm going to say greet user. So by the way, this is what we call camel case when declaring variables. And camel case just means that every new word in your declaration has a uppercase on the first letter of the new word. So if we would say greet user and say hello, we would type it like this. So every new letter in every new word would have a uppercase, and this is what we call camel case declarations in this in common like computer science. So leaving that behind us, we're going to be using greet user. So we created a greet user variable. So this by definition now has no value. We have given it no value, so it is by default the data type undefined. So there is a data type called undefined, and this would be a great example of it. So on the next line, if I declare a new variable and would call it, let's say hello, and this time I'm actually going to give it a value. So I'm going to give it the value of hey, hey, welcome to my tutorial. And this is what we call a string. So this is a string data type. And by the way, these are comments. So by doing // you can comment out code. So when working with string data types, you know that you only have text inside strings. So if you would like to work with numbers, you would declare a new variable. So let's say elite, and let's give it the value of 1337. So this 1337 is a data type of numbers. So to make sure this works, and just to demonstrate that this actually is true, what I'm saying is that we could be using inside of our alert function, we could be using the type of attribute on our say hello. And if I now reload my browser, it's not going to say anything, and that's because greet user has not been defined. So we could be giving greet user the value of undefined. So you could give it the value of undefined, but by default, if you don't declare it, it's still going to be undefined. So if I now reload this site, it's going to say that the type of the say hello variable has the data type of a string. And if I remove the type of and just say hello and reload, it's going to say, hey, welcome to my tutorial. And that's because it has the value of, hey, welcome to my tutorial. That's what the value we've given it. And by default, it's going to know that it's a string data type because of the quotation marks. And if I change my alert and say elite, it's gonna reference to line 3, which has the value of 1337. So it's gonna type out 1337. And if I do the type off check on my elite, it's gonna tell me that the data type of elite is a number. And this is what we call data types in computer science. So there is 2 more primitive data types I'd like to demonstrate, and one of them are booleans. So booleans are a data type that only takes in 2 values. It either takes in the value of true or the value of false. So it's binary. It only takes in 2 values. So we're gonna give this the declaration of, let's call it is teacher. And I'm gonna give this the value of true. So it can either take in the value of true and it can take in the value of false. And this is what we call a Boolean data type. So if I change out elite for is teacher and reload my browser, it's gonna tell me that the data type of is teacher variable is a Boolean. And if I remove the type of and reload, it's gonna say true. Okay, so we have one more data type I'd like to demonstrate, and that is the null. So null is a data type which means no value. So we're gonna give it the value of null. And this means that it undefined means that it has not been defined, while null means that it has been defined, but it has been given the value of null, which means it has been given the value of nothing. So that's the difference between undefined and null. But if we do a type of check on our null, it's actually gonna tell us that it's a object. And this is pretty much because of a bug that happened during the origin of JavaScript, which no longer could be changed, unfortunately. But it's still the reference. It's still its own data type, and we use null when we want to give the value of nothing. So this is the number, and this is undefined. Is teacher is a Boolean which has the value true. Boolean. And then we have the data type null, which in JavaScript has the data type object. So these are the primitive data types we have when working in JavaScript.